But right now, we're going to get right to it with your reality check. Yes, indeed, America, it is true, in a stunning breakthrough for diplomacy. The leaders of North and South Korea agreed on Friday to work to remove all nuclear weapons from the Korean Peninsula within the year. Pursue talks with the United States to declare an official end to the Korean War, which ravaged the peninsula from 1950 to 1953, at a historic summit meeting, the first time a North Korean leader ever set foot in the South. The leaders vowed to negotiate a treaty to replace a truce that has kept an uneasy peace on the divided Korean Peninsula for over the past 6 decades. Let's dive in to this diplomatic spaghetti. Yes, indeed, America, it is true. And we also have more breaking news that the North Koreans have agreed to release 3 Americans that have been held as prisoners of war in North Korea as part of a goodwill measure as we just seems to be weeks away from a North Korean, United States sit down. Now, there's a lot of talk about how we got to this sit down. But before we get to how we got there, let's take a listen to President Kim Jong-un, the brutal dictator of North Korea, talking at a press conference about this bold new agreement between North and South Korea.
오늘 이 자리에서 평화 번영, 북남 관계가 정말 새로운 역사가 씌워지는 그런 순간에 이런 출발점에 서서 그 출발선에서 신호탄을 쏜다는 그런 마음가짐을 가지고 여기 왔습니다.
A new history of peace and prosperity in the inter-Korean relationship. In relations is what he says. And to some extent, people are trying to figure out how we got here. Now, let me say this. It's very interesting to watch how conservatives have turned coat on this one. Remember, it wasn't when President Obama said he wanted to sit down with Kim Jong-un, the conservative movement went literally nuts. I wish we could have played a video montage of everything bad they said about why we should not sit down with the North Koreans. Now that President Trump is sitting down with the North Koreans, they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. He should get a Nobel Peace Prize. God save the Queen. But August 7th, 2017, America, pull the tapes. It was an episode of Outnumbered. I was on said episode of Outnumbered. And on said episode of Outnumbered, I said very clearly, I think now more than ever, we should be sitting down with the North Koreans. And I was hosed by my fellow Outnumbered colleagues. Right? I was out-hosed by the 4 women on the couch. Oh my God, that's awful. Why would we sit down with this brutal dictator? Now everybody is saying how great it is that we are sitting down with the North Koreans. But here at the Fowler Show, we said it first. And here's why we said it, America. Because Kim Jong-un is intent on developing a nuclear weapon. He might have already developed one. Period. And so since he's already developed a nuclear weapon, or is intent on developing a nuclear weapon, and there's nothing that seems to stop him, right? Engaging him militarily doesn't seem to be a solution. Because in response to military, agitation, he's only going to respond with a nuclear weapon. Right? So the best chance we have at bringing peace to this very volatile situation is by engaging in some level of diplomacy. And the best type of diplomacy you can engage in is face-to-face diplomacy. Yes, to some extent we will give some legitimacy to the North Korean regime. But in exchange for giving him that legitimacy, we could save the world from a potential nuclear war, a potential nuclear holocaust, a potential nuclear winter. So let's put that there for a minute. Let's leave that where it is. Right? So you have all these military exercises happening. You have President Trump on Twitter, what these conservatives like to call Trump's tough talk. And while that's going down, you have a new president or prime minister elected in South Korea. A prime minister in South Korea that says, Mr. Moon, who says, wait a minute. We can't continue our old way of doing things. That hasn't been very effective for us. This ideal of having this demilitarized zone with landmines that we stare at each other and we have a phone doesn't seem to be very effective, number one. Number two, if we don't figure out a solution to our own internal family struggle, you have to remember, the key word between North and South Korea is Korea. These are brothers and sisters, husbands and wives, cousins, right? And they're like, if we don't figure out our problem, then we're going to have the world engaging on our peninsula. And here's the thing, if there's a military, some sort of military engagement on this Korea peninsula, both North Koreans will die and South Koreans will die. So the South Koreans have an incentive to figure this thing out. So he says, let me talk to my North Korean ally and figure out how we get this to work. China has an incentive because China does not want the United States meddling in its sphere of influence. So all this is taking place. And so that is why you have this unprecedented meeting. And in this meeting, Mr. Kim says this: I have come here to put an end to the history of confrontation between North and South. Mr. Moon says, South and North Korea confirmed the common goal of realization through complete denuclearization and a nuclear-free Korean peninsula. This event has set the tone, America. This event has set the tone for a more critical summit meeting that will have President Trump, that will have Mr. Kim Jong-un, that will have the Chinese, that will likely have the Japanese, all sitting at the table, figuring out how we create some type of peace in this region, one of the most likely scenarios of nuclear war. Now in Washington, President Trump, with his sticky Twitter fingers, was chomping at the bit to weigh in. And here's what he said: good things are happening, but only time will tell. 15 minutes later, he declared in all caps, Korean War to end, and said that all Americans should be very proud of what's taking place on the Korean Peninsula. And Mr. President, yes, we are proud, but we are cautiously optimistic, and here is why. Because, Mr. President, you lack, well, Benjamin Franklin said it this. I'm trying to remember how exactly the quote goes, but I believe the quote goes a little something like, either prepare to fail or fail to prepare, or prepare to fail. And Mr. President, you like this sort of haphazard, you're like I would say like you're like a hurricane, but hurricanes actually do some preparation. There's like tracks and there's, courses. You're more like a tornado. You just sort of show up in the middle of the night, not prepared. You just rain havoc down. And so while I'm happy we're having this meeting, here's my fear. My fear is, sir, that you're not going to be prepared. We're not going to have pre-negotiations. There's not going to be, yes, you have a Secretary of State that thinks like you, which is great, right, for you. Yes, you pulled off a covert meeting between Kim Jong-un and Mike Pompeo. But will you be prepared? Will there be enough staff members at state to work on a deal so that when you get in the room with Kim Jong-un, things are already taken care of, stuff is already handled, things are already prepared? That, America, should be our concern. Or is it going to be I'm a deal maker and we're going to live televise this sort of negotiations as he did with everything else? Remember when the president he did this sort of live negotiations on guns? And then guess what happened, America? Nothing. Nothing happened.